Today on Locked On Canadiens, is the Laval first line determined?
You're Locked On Canadiens, your daily podcast on the Montreal Canadiens, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi there, everyone, and welcome to episode 1147. As always, we thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We are free and available every day on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts as part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where you get your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. My name is Laura Saba, also known as the Active Stick, and I'm joined by the wonderful Ian Boisvert, also known as Maybe It's Ian. Ian, 2 games in 2 nights. I don't think that I was in game shape yet. I'm a little bit tired, but the Canadiens pulled out a win.
The Canadiens may not only never lose again, but they may never give up another goal as long as we live.
Officially.
Officially, yeah. I mean, look, there was a 0 on the board on Monday night. There was another 0 on Tuesday night. 4 goalies have combined for shutouts for the Montreal Canadiens. So it was funny up until the second goal of the game against New Jersey. I had a thought in my head of saying that Jake Allen was one of 4 goalies to play in this game and the only one to give up a goal, and that the Canadiens won the trade. But that would have been mean. And then it was also not true as soon as the second goal went in from Nick Suzuki. So, oh well, memes aside, pretty great night.
Yes, absolutely. And so the Canadiens definitely showed up in the preseason with a lot of energy. And I think one thing that we are going to talk about a little bit later is the fact that Logan Mailloux played both games so far, and he seems to be the only one that they're doing this to. So we're going to ask some questions a little bit later about that. But first, let's talk about what is turning out to be an extremely strong line in the preseason, and that may very well make up the top line in Laval throughout this season.
Yeah, it's, the third line on Tuesday night was Sean Farrell, Owen Beck, and Filip Mesar. And, just like every other line, I think in this game, the first period you can kind of just write off because these guys are still kind of getting used to playing with each other. However, they did play with each other in the rookie tournament. So I thought as the game went on, they developed a lot of chemistry. They had two really good looks in that first period, especially Farrell and Beck combined for a couple of really good chances. And then I thought Mesar really shined the rest of the game, making some really smart passes. He unfortunately had to take a penalty to cover for a Logan Mailloux fumble of the puck on the power play. So I don't know, that line seems like it is built to be an offensive line in the American Hockey League for the Laval Rocket. And if that's what that line is, they're going to get a ton of playing time. And there's the opportunity for those guys to rack up some points playing together. I find that line is really complementary. Owen Beck's really nice, defensively responsible, but can also play up in the offensive zone. And the 2 wingers are really, really slick playmakers. That's a really fun line to me if I'm going to watch Laval Rocket hockey. That's something I would be tuning in to watch.
Yeah, I think the only hiccup in that, though, is that I feel like Owen Beck probably has a much stronger chance of making the Canadiens earlier than the other 2.
Sure.
And then you'd have to find the center that works there. But right now on the Canadiens, and we're going to knock on wood because we don't want any injuries, there is a logjam at center as well. So it's probably a lot better for Owen Beck to go to Laval, play top line minutes, play as many minutes in a game as possible, than be an extra forward up in Montreal or play the fourth line, et cetera, et cetera. I feel like what I really love about Owen Beck is that he's so dominant at the things that he's good at. And it's kind of the same for the other 2 as well. We talk a lot about Filip Mesar, the finesse in his game is fantastic. There's a lot of stuff that he has to work on, but just everything, everything in his game is so refined, I find. And it makes up for Owen Beck's sort of a little bit rough around the edges. And that's not, his job is not necessarily to have that beautiful skill, right? It's more
right.
to create opportunities, winning those faceoffs, to be defensive, to be smart, to kind of do that. So I feel like it goes really well. And Sean Farrell is kind of like a marriage of the 2.
Yeah. And, not a ton in the way of scoring in that game for them. However, a couple inches to the right and Filip Mesar has a goal. He hit the post. I don't think that we look at these games these games being preseason games as sort of opportunities to start looking at numbers. Like as a degenerate, I kind of found myself on Natural Stat Trick, like what line is playing the best? What line? I'm like, I stopped myself midway through it. Like, what are you doing? Like, this isn't helpful. No, you're not doing anything helpful. They played against McDermott for some reason. Like, I will say, like the Canadiens being in the preseason is great. The level of competition they have played against,
Not great.
NHL. Like the team the Flyers sent yesterday, the team that the Devils sent on Tuesday, like. They were not good. Those are not good hockey teams. That's not to say the Flyers and Devils are bad hockey teams. That's to say the teams, the rosters they sent were not good.
Right.
So all of it needs to be taken with that grain of salt. But with that said, like that third line, which will probably be the first line in Laval, and they're going to get tons of power play looks together, and they're going to have the opportunity to be seasoned down in Laval. Whereas in the past when the Canadiens didn't have a ton of strong forwards, these are the kinds of players that they would have to play on their third and fourth line because they had nobody else, right? Like, wouldn't it have been nice to maybe just keep Nikita Sherbak in the minors instead of just bringing him up to play the fourth line and play 8 minutes a night in Montreal? That was definitely a good use of everyone's time. So it's a good opportunity for them to be in. It's a good problem for them to have. There's too many centers is awesome. I love that. That's a great problem for us.
Right, because historically the Habs have had not enough. So, honestly, like that's a very positive sign in this game. So I wanted to talk a little bit about, the lack of competition here with like these rosters that they're sending. I think to me it looks more like glorified practice, right? Like a more intensified practice. And at the same time, like they're giving these players a chance to develop some chemistry. But I also kind of want to look at why they played Logan Mailloux in both games. Like to me, that's like, is it because he needs more time, or is it because they want to assess his game? I'm trying to figure out what that is. Are they trying to get him in game shape? Is it because there's a question mark as to whether he should be in Montreal or Laval? Because I think if you're asking any questions, like Lane Hutson's got that spot locked up. Like I don't see anyone but Lane Hutson having that spot.
It's really interesting going from the rookie showcase to this because he was the captain of the rookie showcase team, Logan Mailloux, and he played on the top pairing with Lane Hutson, a pairing that we all admit will probably never happen in the NHL because they are not complementary players, to then playing his first preseason game on Monday on the third pair with Adam Engstrom, while Lane Hutson played with David Savard, to now watching David Reinbacher skate with Mike Matheson, and he plays on the second pair with Jaden Struble. Jaden Struble was probably the closest to the NHL between him and between Struble and Engstrom. So I mean, he got a tweener NHL defenseman and a guy who's going to play in the AHL. Meanwhile, Reinbacher gets Mike Matheson, and Lane Hutson gets the guy he played with in his 2 NHL games last year. So it's very curious. I'm not sure what this all means. It might just be smoke and mirrors. It might just be, hey, we know you're going to be here towards the end of camp, and you're going to be playing against NHL competition at the end of camp. Why don't we play David Reinbacher up here first, just so we can get a glimpse of what we're looking at, see if he can handle playing with Mike Matheson, because that's an adventure in and of itself. So I don't know what to make of it exactly yet. I'm sure by this time in 2 weeks, we'll have an idea of what they were thinking. We'll look back on this and go, see, now I know what they were doing. But right now, like we don't have the benefit of hindsight. It's very interesting to wonder why he got 2 consecutive games and he's the only player across these 2 rosters that did so.
Yeah, and they've got a couple more games coming up, obviously, before the regular season starts, before final cuts are made, et cetera, et cetera. So it's going to be interesting to see the pattern of who they play in what game. And I do want to get into, obviously, the top line. I want to talk about David Reinbacher. I want to talk about Michael Pezzetta, because yesterday we talked about how he's going to end up in Laval, and now it's, it looks like he was listening. But before we go into our next segment, I just want to remind everybody that you can find us on Instagram at Locked On Canadiens. It is a new account. We're putting graphics and stuff up there. Like in the regular season, we'll have all kinds of game graphics and videos, etc., like clips from the show, so that you can kind of see what you're getting into before the episode drops. And also, I want to remind you to stay until the end of the episode, because we've been doing trivia on every episode. Well, most of the episodes, not the ones where we have guests, but we've been doing trivia. And I'm really excited because this is the first one where I got it as soon as Ian asked the question. So make sure you stay tuned until the end of the episode for the trivia. But in the meantime, we're going to be talking about David Reinbacher and more up next. But first, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You hear us talk about FanDuel all the time. And NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. You heard that right, but I'm going to say it again. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet on FanDuel. That's FanDuel.com. All right, I want to talk a little bit about David Reinbacher. So in the rookie showcase, he played 2 games. We thought that he looked very nervous in the first game, and he only started looking a little bit better towards the end. Actually, it was kind of sandwiched, right? Like he started out looking really good, and then he took a penalty very early in the game, and then he kind of unraveled. Then he found it back, and he looked a lot better in the second game. But I think it's interesting that they chose to play him with Mike Matheson, knowing, I think we all know that David Reinbacher is going to the AHL this year. I think he's expected to go there. I don't think that there's a scenario where he leapfrogs, all the other guys like Logan Mailloux, Justin Barron. I don't know where we're putting Jaden Struble at this point, like Lane Hudson. Like there's all these guys he's going to have to be better than or earn the spot ahead of. And I think the Canadiens, as well as us, we would prefer him to stay in Laval. But what did you think of his game in the preseason?
Yeah, he's continuing to come as advertised for me. Like his skating is so smooth. Like I kind of we take that for granted a lot in the NHL because a lot of these guys are really smooth skaters, but it seems like he was born skating. Like if that makes any sense to anybody. Like he just seems like this is very effortless to him, which is going to be helpful when he's playing in really high intensity environments and high intensity situations where, the puck's getting dumped into his corner and he needs to move quickly. That part of his game being as innate as it is going to allow him to escape from those kind of, issues. His feet are going to allow him to get out of trouble. I also think he plays a lot bigger than he is. And I know he is big. I think he's 6'4". He plays bigger than that, if that's possible. I still wonder about his offensive ceiling. He hasn't shown a ton. I mean, in this game, he did technically score a goal that was waved off, even though I think video review would have allowed the goal to stand.
Mm-hmm.
As I think
you were the one that pointed out it's like it evens out the
with
thing
the
from
one
yesterday.
Yeah, with the one from Philadelphia where the Canadiens absolutely got gifted a shutout because they can't use video review in the preseason. Which, by the way, like, why not? I understand like you want these games to go quickly, but doesn't that help them practice the process of video review? I would imagine it's not all the same staff up there in the war room, right? Like, why are we just like, that's for the regular season only? We don't do that in the preseason. I get that it doesn't matter, but it should matter to you guys to get calls right. Anyway, that's a soapbox for another day. We were talking about David Reinbacher.
Yes.
I still really like his game. I still think that Laval is the place for him. And he said as much. He said, if it's Laval, I know that these guys have a plan. So he's got a great attitude. I really, really like the player. I really, really like the kid. I hope we get a couple more games of him before they send him back down, just because I want to keep seeing him be put in situations where he's a little bit outside of his comfort zone.
Yeah.
But no complaints about his game, really. It was a solid night for him.
Absolutely. And I think, playing him with Mike Matheson was kind of the right call. Yes, it was an adventure, but they complement each other, or the idea of both players complement each other. I don't know if necessarily in every in-game situation that's how it worked out tonight, but like, in a vacuum or in an 82-game season, et cetera, you want to play the guy who's a little bit more offensive with the guy who's more of a stay-at-home. And I really like that we still call him kind of a stay-at-home defenseman because it's kind of redefined, right? Like you used to think of stay-at-home defenseman as a guy who's just like really slow and large and like hits
Douglas
people,
Murray,
right? Yeah, 100%. Remember some dudes. That's the dude to remember today.
That's the
And so
prototypical stay-at-home defenseman to me is Douglas Murray, because I don't think I ever saw him leave his defensive zone.
But that's pretty much the kind of person I was thinking of. Whereas, in today's NHL, which is it's not that further, it's not that far back, but it's a lot more refined. The idea of a stay-at-home defenseman means the guy who's not creating necessarily offensive chances. He's not that he's not that dynamic offensive player, but he's doing a lot of that stuff where he's fast, he's reactive, he sees the play, he can control the game, right? Like
Yeah.
it's a lot less passive than what you would call a stay-at-home defenseman. So I feel like David Reinbacher embodies that extremely well. Whereas with Mike Matheson, I wouldn't necessarily call him stay-at-home in any sense of the
No,
word.
no.
I would call him wandering around a lot. Maybe you should put him on a leash kind of
Yeah,
player.
he is like the kind of player he is a rover, which is
Yeah.
like the old days of hockey where there weren't defensemen, there was forwards and rovers.
Yeah.
That's what he is. He kind of just goes where he wants to. David Reinbacher is a stay-at-home type. I think of him more as a really good first pass defenseman, right? Like he's gonna need while his skating is smooth, he doesn't have explosive speed. Like Mike Matheson is quite fast. He's
Yeah.
they're both really great skaters, but in different ways. Um, you know, Reinbacher learning to get that first pass crisp and clean onto the forwards tape is going to help this team tremendously, because their transition game is something that has really been a struggle the last few years because they haven't had a defenseman outside of Mike Matheson who can do that.
Right.
They're hoping that Justin Barron can still kind of become that kind of player. They're hoping, and I think it's a lot clearer, that Hudson can be that kind of player. Not so much with the first pass, but with, I'm just going to move my feet and get it out of here by myself.
Yeah.
But I think Reinbacher fits really well into that kind of mold. I know when he was drafted, the Moritz Seider comp was made because they were both picked around the same spot. I think they were both playing in the same league when they got picked. I mean, if he turns out like Mo Seider, are we mad? Like that's an excellent. I mean, you just had a chat with the Red Wings guys, and you saw how stoked they were about
Yeah.
having Mo Seider locked up for as long as they have him. If that's David Reinbacher, cool. I'm so sold on that. That's awesome.
Yeah. 100%. But for me, the thing that I worry about though is the expectation. Like when the
Yeah,
comparison turns into an expectation, that's where I'm a little bit nervous.
yeah, it's
um,
true, and that was the danger of that pick, right? Was, can this player justify the pick at that time and place?
yeah.
Um,
I'm
that's
still really
always
high
going to.
on him.
Yeah, I'm even on draft day when they picked him, and as soon as the disappointment of Michkov not coming to Montreal wore off, he was a guy that you look at and you go, okay, it makes a lot of sense for this hockey team to pick a player like him.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm not as worried about that as I am potentially about the Canadiens' power play, which I know the top unit was only 80% of what it should be, because God bless Yoel Armia, but he probably will not be on that first power play unit on night one. But until we get both, both first, the first and second line in the same lineup, we're not going to see that first power play. But what did they go tonight? 0 for 8 with a five, another full 2-minute 5-on-3. Like,
It felt
hey,
like 0 for 16.
yeah, 0 for 194. Like it felt like, I mean, there were 14 total penalties in the game on Tuesday night.
Yeah.
Like, that was a ref show if I've ever seen one. But it's the preseason for them too. I'll give them some grace there. But it was still not super fun. There was I think there was a total of like 28 minutes of 5-on-5 time. Like, that's bad. That's not a very enjoyable hockey game.
Absolutely. And that's the thing. Like, it's part of the lumps that we take in the preseason. Okay, so in our next segment, I do want to talk about the top line. I want to talk about Michael Pezzetta. But first, I have a call to action for our listeners. Not just follow us on Instagram at Locked On Canadiens, or wait until the end for our trivia. But I recently moved. I'm looking for Habs artwork to put on my wall so that I can get rid of this virtual background that all of you are so graciously being patient and not complaining too much about. And I want Habs artwork, preferably by independent artists, and particularly marginalized artists. I want to put some of that on my walls before, so that that can be my background. So you can email us that at lockedoncanadiens@gmail.com, as well as your mailbag questions and anything you want to talk to us about. But yes, please share your recommendations for artwork for me to put on my wall so that, it can be my YouTube background. All right. In our next segment, we're going to talk a little bit about the first line. Is there anything to say about them? And then about Michael Pezzetta. And that's coming up in just one moment. But first, this episode is also brought to you by Indeed. When you need to hire, you need Indeed. We're driven by the search for better, but when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match. With Indeed, Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. One of the things that I really love about Indeed is that it takes away all of the busy work, that, the guesswork. You can do all of it on one platform, and you can really truly find the best quality candidates really fast on Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. All right, so there was a moment where I was really worried that I keep calling him McMermaid. I don't know why. Curtis McDermott. Mermaids are cool things, not like plotting thugs. I was a little bit worried that, he had broken Juraj Slafkovsky's ankles. How did they look, playing together? It's been a while since we've seen them, but they were one of the only things we were happy with last year.
Yeah, and I mean, again, slow start. It's the first game action that those three have had since April. But I mean, they connected for a lot of good looks. On Suzuki's goal, the second goal of the game, where he deflected a Trudeau shot pass into the net. What set that up beforehand was Caulfield, skating through the neutral zone and going board to board, setting up Slafkovsky in stride. Slafkovsky then took it in and then was able to just he was skating around the back of the net, and before he got around it completely, he just put a puck out right on Caulfield's stick. It was a great save by Nico Daws at that point. And then they ended up scoring on that shift anyway. Look, I think that line is going to be a set it and forget it line. I don't know that we're ever going to have to worry about them as far as, nightly contributions to the lineup, especially when, they have a full complement of NHL defensemen playing behind them. But that was the thing I looked forward to the most coming into this game, was just seeing those three play hockey again, because last season, what wasn't the nightmare that we've had in the past, there wasn't a ton to cheer about, especially after Doc went down to injury. That line, as soon as it was constructed, was one of the saving graces of the season. So to get them back, to see them play again, and to see Caulfield wear 13 for the first time, that's pretty cool. I think it suits him. I'm hoping for a big year for him, just because last year I know he was, quote, disappointed with, even though it was a career year for him in points, which is hilarious coming off of a shoulder surgery. So it's a fun line. It's going to be a fun line all year. It doesn't look like they're going at 100% because they know what kind of game they're playing against, what kind of opponents they're playing against. But yeah, no complaints there. How did you feel about their night?
It just felt so good to see them again.
Yeah.
I also one day want them to play, not just for fun, just play New Hook on that line so they can be 13, 14, 15. Just for fun, not forever, Marty, just for me,
Yeah.
But I did feel, it felt like a sight for sore eyes. And that's saying a lot considering how buzzed we were after yesterday's game, how hyped we were. It was fun, and so this time around, I think they're like you said, slow start, but I feel like they didn't feel the need to excessively exert themselves because they know that they're going to be playing together. They know they're most probably the top line. They are the line that everybody's going to rely on, but coming into this and having that line behind you so you don't have to shoulder all the workload, I think, particularly to somebody like Nick Suzuki, that must feel really good. It must give you an added, bit of confidence. And I think with Cole Caulfield, like he said that he was disappointed in himself because we kept talking about how many goals he wasn't scoring, but he
Right.
got so much better in so many other areas of his game. Like Marty did so good,
Yeah.
because the story of last year was Slavkovsky's breakout, but you can't discount like the improvements that Cole Caulfield made. So like coming off of shoulder surgery, still getting those points, having like little improvements in his defensive game and his positional game, all that kind of stuff last year. Now coming into this season wanting to score more goals, I feel like how did we get so lucky, right? We're so spoiled. We should be knocking on wood just to make sure, we don't jinx anything. But I felt like it felt like home. It felt like, everything is like falling into place, seeing them play together, sight for sore eyes, all of that. Like that to me is like hockey's back. And finally, there's so many people to talk about, but I want to focus the last few minutes of our show on Michael Pezzetta, because Michael Pezzetta is the type of player who is so often going to be victimized by other players' progress, right? There are going to be other players that are ahead of him in the depth chart, and Michael Pezzetta is not going to be able to have a say in that. It's just because they are more talented and more useful to the team in certain situations. But I thought that the energy that he brought, obviously scoring goals, that's also a big thing. I feel like he hasn't taken a step back. Like he comes to every game playing as if it's going to be his last.
Yeah, because it might be just the way that the way that the type of player that he is unfortunately expendable in the NHL, right? So he needs to, in games like this where there's an opportunity for him to show that maybe he's not as expendable as people think he needs to show up and show out. And he constantly does, right? Like this isn't he has games like this where you're like, man, Michael Pezzetta was really effective tonight. I thought when he was skating towards that empty net, did you for a split second, like me, think that some kind of shenaniganery was going to happen? I thought he was going to wind up and Ridley Grieg that into the net, and we were going to have a full line brawl in preseason game 2. And
Yeah.
I think I personally owe Mike Pezzetta a small apology for thinking that he would do that, but also no, I don't, because there was a part of him that probably thought about doing it as well.
I like to think that he was thinking about it and then he thought to himself, this is Sens-like behavior and I'm not going to exhibit it.
Yeah, I think
That's how I'm choosing to
that was a business decision, because as good as that game was for him, if he does that, it undoes everything that came before it.
Exactly.
So, he didn't put it in the empty net and ride his stick like a broomstick, like Tiger Williams, like he did in that Buffalo shootout. Was that last year or the year before?
I want to say it was last year, but it all blends together.
Yeah, I look. I'm always stoked when Mike Pezzetta has a great night. And now we can, once the regular season starts, we can enjoy those guilt-free without the thought of tanking again. So, those are going to be fun games when he steals us a point here or there.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, it is time for trivia. Ian, do you want to repeat yesterday's trivia question?
I will, and then I'm going to give you a chance for a victory lap, because as soon as we hung up the call, you knew exactly who it was. Name the player who followed this career path: Washington, Tampa Bay, Washington again, Atlanta, St. Louis, Boston, Philadelphia, Montreal. Laura, who am I?
I am Glenn Metropolitan.
The waiver legend himself, Glenn Metropolitan, who of course was waived by the Philadelphia Flyers and claimed by the Montreal Canadiens on a day where the Flyers were playing the Montreal Canadiens. He packed his bag and literally probably went down the hall at what was then the Wachovia Center. I think now they call it something different in Philadelphia. Wells Fargo. There you go. You know better than me. I mean, one of the best shots of Glenn Metropolitan was him getting a fist bump from Jean Beliveau before a playoff game. That was pretty sick. I mean, that might be one of the coolest moments in a player's career, to be honest.
Absolutely.
So we will always remember. What's that?
He was very beloved. And also in that game against Philadelphia, he had a breakaway that he didn't score on. And Philadelphia was cheering him on.
Yeah. I believe, and someone can go check this too. I believe they won that game in overtime. Montreal did.
I think
so we have another one, a similar question today. Another, name the player who followed this career path playing against the Devils. This is a former Montreal Canadian and New Jersey Devil. This is the career path: Chicago, New York Rangers, New York Islanders, Colorado, Montreal, Toronto, New Jersey, Nashville. Bit of an even bigger journeyman than Glenn Metropolitan. I'll repeat that. Chicago, New York Rangers, New York Islanders, Colorado, Montreal, Toronto, New Jersey, and then Nashville to end his career.
I am going to let the listeners ruminate on that, and we'll have the answer tomorrow. In the meantime, we will be back tomorrow, obviously, with our episodes, since we are back up to 5 days a week, and we're so excited about that. You can catch us wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. Please subscribe. Please tell your friends. We're so excited about this season. There's so much going on. You can find us all over social media. We're at Locked On Canadiens on Instagram. We're at LO_Canadiens on Twitter. You can find my wonderful co-host at Maybe It's Ian on social media. You'll find me at The Active Stick. Thank you so much for listening. And make sure you are back tomorrow.